Hey everybody, welcome back to Parsnips and Parsimony. This is going to be a Q&A from you guys on all the things in my garden from 2020 as well as future plans for 2021. We'll see how far I can get with your questions because you guys had a lot of questions here. So we're just going to start. I'm going to start reading them off and answering them as we go. This is not my normal style video here, but if you're new to our channel, welcome. We're a family of 10. We live on 1/3 of an acre and we try to produce as much as our own food as we can from our tiny little lot. Last year was a fabulous year. We produced over 1,000 pounds coming out of our lot, and looking into 2021, we are making our goals even higher for next year, although I don't know how we're going to do that, but that's our goal. So the first question is, how can I grow plants from seeds? I have more failure than success. Sometimes they sprout, but then they die. A lot of times when you have little baby plants that sprout and then die, it's dampening off, so there's just too much moisture in the soil. And my best suggestion for that is making sure that your plants do dry out before you water them. But of course with seedlings, you don't want them to dry out too much. I always keep my plants once they sprout in a southern window where it's sunny. I have a sprayer that I use, a hand sprayer. I'll put the link for that in Amazon. One of you guys sent it to me and I absolutely love it. I recommend it for anyone who's starting their seeds indoors because I think it makes all the difference in the world. And I also use a fertilizer that one of you guys sent me, and it has also made a tremendous difference in starting my seeds inside. So thank you very much. I don't remember who sent it to me, but it has been one of the most used and loved items, and I would say key to having a successful start with starting my plants inside. Kim asked, I never have any luck with potatoes. They're always tiny. Any suggestions of getting them to grow bigger? I use compost and use cow manure in my soil, but is my soil missing something? So what I read last year, again, I am not the expert at growing potatoes. Last year was my first year of really doing well with potatoes. And what I read is potatoes are kind of finicky. You don't want to necessarily fertilize them heavily when you plant them. So you need to plan ahead a year or two, fertilize your plot or patch a year or two in advance, and then plant them in there. If you go back and watch my video when I planted them though, following Dick Raymond's advice, we did put a granular fertilizer in the base, and there was, I think I also put lime in the bottom, if I remember correctly. It worked. We had great potatoes. They were huge. The quantity I think should have been more, and part of that I think was because I cut the seed potatoes too small and I should have probably left them whole. But for what we got from the few plants we had, I was amazed. So I'm thinking maybe you're over fertilizing and you're getting more leaf production than root production, and that can happen at times. But without testing your soil, I really don't know for sure what the answer is on that. What will you plant more of and less of in the coming year? I don't know. I would think I loved my tomatoes, and you know, considering what's in my garden, I don't know that I would expand it to more tomatoes. The one thing Art wants more of are pickles or cucumbers. So our plan is to move the cucumbers up to our front bed and not keep it in the back bed, because a friend of ours, for her first year gardening, she only had maybe 4 cucumber plants, and she got so many hundreds of pounds of cucumbers, and we asked her, what did you do? And she goes, oh, I just watered them all the time. So I'm thinking we're going to move the cucumber plants up near the house where I can water them more frequently and see if we can get a heavier crop on that. We're also planning on growing more potatoes in the garbage cans because I thought those were really successful. So we'll be expanding our potato harvest, and probably more peppers. We really felt like we did not do well on the peppers. Part of that was the sunflowers, the volunteer sunflowers that, you know, they shaded out too much sunlight and the plants didn't produce. Sharon asked, have you thought about putting your information into an Excel spreadsheet? Because we had 16 pages of numbers we had to calculate. Yes, Sharon, I actually fiddled around with putting the numbers into an Excel spreadsheet, but the trouble I was having was the formulas. And I am doing an online college class on the formulas and things, but they haven't gotten to that part yet. So I was really struggling with how to get it to calculate pounds and ounces. Money, not a problem. Pounds and ounces, yeah, I'm stumped on that. But that certainly would save me a lot of time. Any of you guys know about Excel and know a formula I can use? let me know, because it would save me a lot of time. Karen asked, how do I start a raised bed? So you'd want to get either a raised bed kit or get some repurposed lumber. Stay away from treated lumber. I wouldn't recommend treated lumber just because of the chemicals that are in the wood. You don't want that in your soil and in your food. But find lumber, build yourself, find someone who can build your raised bed, or maybe you can do it yourself, and fill it with compost. And if you have a local garden store, often they'll sell truckloads of topsoil. Throw that in there and just kind of mix it up, and it's probably worth testing your soil to see where the pH level is, because vegetable gardens aren't like blueberries. So blueberries like the soil really acidic, and most gardens, vegetable gardens, like something a little bit sweeter. So definitely take the time to test your soil and then amend it as necessary. I usually, because I have pine trees around my area, I usually have to add lime to my soil at least once every couple of years, just to keep it sweet enough so the vegetables can go. And the first year, don't expect a whole lot, because there is a learning curve to gardening. My parents had a vegetable garden, and when I first got married, I had a small vegetable garden, had almost no sun, and we lived on a sandy place, and the soil was awful. And I remember looking at my tomato plants, and they were these little spindly things, and they were about that tall, and I was so excited. I was like, look at my tomato plants. Looking back, I'm like, go. But everybody has to start somewhere. I had to start someplace, and you just learn as you go. I would recommend getting the book, The Joy of Gardening by Dick Raymond. Fabulous, fabulous book. It's on Amazon, it's on eBay. I have found them at garage sales. I think his books are amazing. They're easy to read, easily laid out, and has everything you need to know how to start gardening. That has been, for me, my gardening Bible. That has helped me so much. Molly asked, will we be doing this style of tallying up our garden again in 2021? And yes, we plan on doing it again. I find it inspiring, and it's a challenge for me to increase my yields. I want to see what worked and what didn't work. And like when we started this in 2017, we skipped 2018. And then looking at 2019, there are things that I see that I did or didn't do that made a change, and either for the good or for the bad. So yes, we are going to be keeping total again in 2021. It's one of those things we really like to do and see the numbers. Molly also asked, what pests did you encounter and how did you deal with them? We had problems with mice and vole in the back garden, and then up front, we had the tomato hornworms, and we had cabbage moths. Cabbage moths are every year. My kids, the girls specifically, love pulling off the cabbage moth worms. So that's a win-win situation. They're not really creepy or anything. They're just like little caterpillars. We pick them off by hand, and it does keep them at bay. There are chemical alternatives you can use, but we do try our best to keep as many chemicals out of our food as we possibly can, and really working on sustainable organic gardening. It's not always possible, but that is our goal. We did put in an owl house with hopes of attracting an owl, which didn't happen in 2020. However, we have the last couple of weeks have been hearing a local owl in the area, which we're hoping it will find our nesting box on the back of the barn and hopefully take care of the mice and the rodents that were in my garden early spring. I'm not exactly sure where they all went, because at some point they just disappeared. They attacked my peas, were the biggest culprits, and our pea quantity for 2020 was not very high, but that was because the moles and voles kept eating our produce, which didn't make me very happy. I did have a critter eat half my row of parsnips at the end of the year. I don't know what it was. I never could find what it was, but I just pulled the parsnips out, so it wasn't really an issue. But critters are definitely a real concern. We have our gardens fenced. The back garden is fenced in to try to keep the rabbits out. And it's done a pretty good, last year was pretty good. Our front garden near the house, we don't have fenced in, but because the kids are always out there, we really haven't had a problem with critters eating anything. Ashley asked, how much were we able to can and preserve out of our garden this year? Will it be enough to last through the fall and winter? I did not write down everything we canned. I should have. I think that would have been very enlightening. I'm going to say we did about 20 quarts of tomato sauce. I think we did about 14 quarts of salsa, and then 11 pints of the taco sauce. I'm never going back to Ortega. There's nothing like homemade taco sauce. Then we did 30, 40 quarts of green beans. So it's not enough to get us through all winter, but it certainly helps. It helps a lot. Marky asked, how long is your growing season, and do we start our seeds inside? Yes, we start some of our seeds inside. Our growing season usually starts the last week of May, right around Labor Day, right through, depending on the year, we've been known to get a frost the first or second week of September. This past season, we didn't get a frost until October, and even that one was really mild, so I was able to cover everything up, and we never got a hard frost until just before the end of October, which is really unusual for us. But our window, because we're in a zone, I think it's a zone 5A, which means we don't have the longest growing season. I try to extend the garden season by starting a lot of my plants inside. So the eggplants, the peppers, the tomatoes all get started inside. Then I'll start some of the flowers inside, but none of the vining crops get planted inside. So I won't be doing any of the squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, or anything like that. Now I did get some seeds, some new seeds from Baker Creek. This is where I ordered last year. I was really happy with them. And we have a new variety of parsnips. From what I understand, parsnip seeds don't last more than a year. And I did have seeds from last year, but I didn't want to risk planting them because they can take 2 to 3 weeks to germinate, at which point you've already lost your window of seeing if the seeds are bad or not. So I think we're just gonna mix the old seeds with the new ones, and what comes up, comes up. But this is the new variety that I got for our parsnips this year. This is the same thing I got last year, the Boston pickling cucumbers. The rattlesnake pole beans, this is what we grew last year, and we felt that this was highly successful. This, however, we did keep some of those seeds from the plants from in the fall. I know one of you guys asked me if we keep our seeds and start them the next year. I did on the pole beans, however, I did have some bush beans, and I don't know if there's any cross-pollination there. So I didn't want to put all my eggs in one basket, so I did buy one package of seeds, which there aren't that many in here, and I'm going to plant the other ones that I had. We're going to see if we notice a difference between the ones that I kept from last year and the ones I got from the seed company. They also sent me, this is a free package from Baker Creek, and this is just some curly leaf kale here. This is actually red kale, and I'm really excited about trying this. We did buy carrots again. They are not the burpee variety on the pre-strips. If you remember those were really easy to lay out. I ended up just picking a carrot that looked good. It sounded good, and we'll give that a shot. I have some lettuce here. This is the Butter King variety. And here's another, this is the kale that I actually wanted this year, the free seed packet. I will grow and I will try it out, but I really wanted a flat leaf kale because it's easier to clean and look for cabbage moths, which the kale does attract cabbage moths. So I ended up getting these peppers because of that taco sauce. If you remember right, I had to actually find someone that sold these type of chili peppers, and they were so hard to find. And I did end up finding someone who was able to give me 4 of them, but they're very hard to find. So I said, this year I am growing my own chili peppers because I want to make more taco sauce. All my other seeds I have from last year. This was only the ones that I wanted for this year. I'm very thankful that I have enough from last year. I do expect the germination rate to be a little lower, so I will be overplanting when I start my seeds in the spring just to compensate for the fact that the seeds are a year older. Briar Rose asked me, how many seeds do you plant? I overplant because particularly when I'm planting my indoor seeds, I do expect some plants to not make it. The fact is I have kids, I have helpers, and sometimes kids like to pull out the seeds, particularly the little guys. Last year I lost a couple baby plants to Lillian, and I suspect I'll probably lose a couple to Daniel. And that's just part of the whole gardening process. If you have kids, kind of expect things to happen, so overplant. For our tomato plants, we're gonna shoot for, again, 6 plants in each of my little rectangles that I have in my garden, which I'll need 24 tomato plants. I'm probably going to plant closer to 40 or 50 tomatoes, depending on what comes up. I will end up sharing with my parents and also probably with my neighbor. And that's just how our local neighborhood works. Last year, my neighbor up the street, she had extra plants that she had started inside and she didn't have any room for. So she shared with me, and it really works out really well, because then you get different varieties of plants. You might not get a lot, but it's just fun to do. And that's how I have done my plants before. I remember one year I had like 80 tomato plants, and I was giving them away free at the street side because I don't want them to go to waste, but I can't plant all of them. So the quantity will be probably more than I will use, but I enjoy, sharing them with other people. How many hours a week do you spend in your garden? When we expanded our garden last year, we spent a lot of time in the garden. And I would say for anyone who is starting out a garden, expect to spend a lot of time in the early spring, late spring, and early summer. Just plan on spending a lot of time in your garden. Weeding, it is highly beneficial to stay on top of weeding, because the weeds really compete with your plants. And if the weeds grow big, your plants are probably going to be small. The one thing we have been doing for many, many years is taking the grass clippings from our yard and spreading them in the garden. And that is excellent weed control. Worth the time that you're going to ever do in your garden is use your grass clippings. My parents have done that for years. We've done it for years. And by the time we hit probably beginning of August, maybe even sooner, maybe mid-July, there wasn't a lot of weeding that needed to be done, which is great. That being said, how much time do we spend in the beginning of the year in our garden? I'm gonna say on average, myself, I was spending close to 10 to 15 hours a week getting the garden going. Now, before you guys all go, yikes, that's a lot of time. First of all, I have two, I don't wanna call them large, I have 2 medium-sized garden plots. I mean, we got 1,000 pounds out of them. It took a lot of time tying up the tomatoes, tying up the zucchinis, tying up the yellow squash, weeding. Then we did have to dig up the garden. Last year we expanded our garden. That meant putting more soil, amending the soil with compost and cow manure. And then we ended up putting pathways down with free mulch that we got. So in the beginning, there was a lot of work to do, especially when you're expanding the garden. This upcoming year, I don't expect to be spending quite as much time. It's probably gonna be closer to the 10-hour mark than the 15-hour mark. But that being said, if you work early in the spring and get all of that weeding done, the grass clippings done, the time later on is far less. And that's what Art and I noticed this year. It was so much better to work hard in the spring because the weeding was totally under control, and it was just replanting and harvesting and processing that was taking our time. But if you're gonna do, 2 medium-sized garden plots, expect to spend quite a bit of time out there in the early months. It is enjoyable, it is worth it, and for me, it is very, very therapeutic. Gardening is totally worth it, but you have to put the time into it and expect to learn and fail at some of your crops. That's just how it goes. And the following year, you're gonna learn more. If you're having trouble with your garden, find a friend who's a gardener in your area and ask them for their help and advice, because I live in zone 5, but you probably don't live in the same zone that I do. So your planting and timing is going to be different than mine. And what might grow great here in upstate New York may be awful in Florida. So YouTube also has some great channels on here on growing things. I always go back to Dick Raymond's The Joy of Gardening. I think it's a fabulous book and so worth your time and effort getting it, because he doesn't cover just one zone. He covers everything, and then you can choose what's best for your area using his techniques. Dina asked, what are my plans for 2021 in my garden? So we are going to be expanding and sharing an additional garden space this year, which I'm really excited about. So beyond our 2 gardens, we have a neighbor who is going to allow us to use his garden space, but we're going to be sharing the produce. So I think that's a great solution for our small area, since we're trying to grow as much as we can on our 1/3 of an acre, but we just like to grow a little bit more. So we will be expanding our garden into using some of his gardening space, which I'm excited about that, and sharing that all with you. I don't think a whole lot's going to change other than our new garden space, which I am excited to get working on. Of course, it's way too early in the year to get started on that, since it's only January. I would like to add growing a small greenhouse. I'm not sure where I'd actually put it. So that may not happen this year, but a girl can dream. Also ask, how do you plan for your garden to produce all year long and not just everything comes at once? And part of that is plants have different growing periods. So lettuce can be mature within like 30 to 45 days, but carrots can take 70, 80, 90 days. Parsnips, I think, is well over 100. So naturally, plants grow at different times and mature at different rates. So that's how that spaces out. We were really happy with our tomatoes this year because we planted 2 different varieties. They spaced out beautifully. So I never had that full on, 300 pounds of tomatoes you have to process all in one day. That didn't happen, and I really felt that by being able to pick a bushel on, say, Monday, and then pick another bushel on Friday or Saturday, it helped me space out my processing, so I could process twice a week, and then I could still keep up with my housework on top of that. And that was just a variety thing. Every tomato variety is a little bit different. I'm planning on doing the same thing this year, using those same varieties, so I'm hoping it'll work out just as well. To have a shorter growing period like lettuce and spinach, you have to replant those throughout the season. So in the spring, usually, like, depending on the weather, but I'm going to say probably the 2nd week or 3rd week of April, I'll plant lettuce. Now that's going to be a little slow to grow because it's still cold. The soil's still cold. I do tend to grow it in my cold frame, so that will help. But then that will grow for a week or 2, and then I'll go ahead and replant 2 more rows of lettuce. And then another 2 weeks from that, I'll replant another 2 rows of lettuce. And that just helps keep the lettuce going for a longer period of time. The one thing we did this year was planting a fall crop, which I had never had success doing, but I loved it. And it was really, really, in my mind, it was really successful because we got bok choy, we got spinach, we have lettuce, and some of those lettuces are still under my little hot caps right now in the middle of winter. And I think that's going to be some of the first lettuce I'm going to get for 2021. And then we planted carrots and beets. Both of the beets were not quite so successful, but the carrots were wildly successful, even better than we planted earlier in the springtime. So again, the Joy of Gardening has all that information about planting fall crops. I would definitely encourage fall planting again because it's a whole nother animal. It's not like spring planting. And I look forward in 2021 to doing more of that. Now that I have a little bit of experience under my belt, I want to expand on that. That's where those carrots come in. Carrots were fabulous in the fall, and I would recommend that for anyone. Ask, what is one thing that I would absolutely love to grow that I haven't grown yet? For Art, I can tell you he'd love to grow watermelon. That is just something on his list. He would love to grow watermelon. I'm not sure if this year we're going to be able to. Another thing that I want to grow that I haven't grown are some different varieties of peppers. I'm doing the big chili peppers this year. And then one of you guys sent me a new type of hot and spicy pepper that we're also going to be trying. So those are some things I would like to grow. Another thing, if I had space, would be asparagus. I really like asparagus. It's really healthy for you. It's one of the first vegetables you get in the springtime, and I would love to grow that. I do feel like I'm just short on space with asparagus plants, so I haven't grown that. The other thing I'd really like to grow is a huge strawberry patch and a whole blackberry and raspberry patch. Those are 2 of the other things I would like to grow. I All right, I think that's all the questions that I have for now. I hope this answers some of your questions. If you have any more, please feel free to hop on over to the community page and interact with me over there. And to the 2021 garden year, sharing it here with you guys, and maybe even doing a little bit more separate videos on how I do things that can hopefully help you and inspire you to growing your own vegetables. Remember, there's no space that's too small. You can always grow in containers, on windowsills. There's so much potential out there. I would encourage all of you at least try growing one thing this spring and summer garden year. Have fun with it and enjoy the process of gardening because it's fun and you can always learn something new. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you are having a fabulous day and we'll see you for our next video. Bye.